Welcome to What Was He Thinking? My name is A.B. Bracewell. Today I'm going to be your personal tour guide through a man's psyche. Take this journey as we explore why a man thinks the way he thinks, why a man acts the way he acts, and why a man feels the way he feels. No question is off limits, and no topic is too hard. By the end of the show, you'll have a better understanding and a better insight of who we are as men. Today, we're going to be exploring the hurt that we caused. The hurt that we caused by our healthy and unhealthy lessons that we learn as Black men in America. I have two of my good friends coming on today to share some of their experience, share some of their thoughts, some of their ideas, and some of the lessons that they have learned, and not only the lessons that they've learned, but how those lessons and habits might have affect women, how it affect the way we look at relationships, and we're going to go into how we can possibly help other generations coming up after us on how to be more responsible, how to be more respectful, and how to manage their sexuality as young men and as growing men. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in my guests. Welcome, and thank you for being part of the show. Welcome to What Was He Thinking? Please introduce yourselves. I know I didn't do it justice. I know you guys do a lot more than what I said. So Jamil, introduce yourself.
Yeah, man. Listen, I appreciate it. You said more than enough, Adam. So, Jamil Rush. I am a Christian. I'm the loving husband of Natasha Rush, my wife. We've been together now for 6 years. I told Adam beforehand, I plead the fifth, man. I'm married. I'm happily married, so I don't want no smoke coming out of this episode here. But yeah, I've been a member of Greater Exodus Baptist Church on Broad and Fairmount for many years, for I think at least 20 plus years now. I'm just excited to be in this topic and to be a part of the number with you. So I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. Aubrey?
My name is Aubrey Martin, good friend. Adam was like my brother. You know what I'm saying? I'm an only child, but he is my brother. I'm also a deacon. I'm also a husband. I'm also a high school teacher. I'm also a father. He said of 3, but of 4. You forgot Chloe. I'll have Chloe come get you next time you come by the house. I'm going to be mad at you. A father of 4. Been married 10 years, in a relationship with my wife for 18. That's about it.
Okay, well, once again, thank you for being on the show. And the first question, I'm going to go right off the bat. We don't have that much time, so let's just jump right into it. The first question is, how would you describe your sexual education, or the sexual education that Black men receive in America? Will you describe it as healthy or unhealthy?
I would describe it as unhealthy. I would describe it as misguided. I would describe it as there is no real sexual education process for the Black man that I've seen in place. I think a lot of the stuff we've learned with secondhand information from either somebody we know, friends, people in the neighborhood, the music, what we see on television. So I don't think there was any real positive sexual education when we was coming up. I don't think there's any positive sexual education going on right now. So I think it's non-existent.
I'd say it's incomplete, right? And I hate to speak in totalities because I think different people have different like circumstances. But if I think about personally, I started to learn about the act of sex in 5th or 6th grade in health class. They start to talk to you about what sex is, which is one piece of it. But the emotional impact of it is I would argue, the greater learning curve surrounding it, right? So especially for young Black men, in the absence, especially when I'd say it's more prevalent now, but certainly when we were growing up, the lack of Black male teachers. that you're able to have these types of conversations with. So in class, I would learn about what sex is in terms of the interaction, but as far as how do I get that emotional impact around it, that's dependent upon you having Black male role models who have healthy relationships with sex already. And I would say, even from a church standpoint, right? Like growing up in church, church is centered around shame, don't do it. But there's much fewer conversations around what does this mean? How does it impact you? How do you wrestle with it across society? So I would say it's incomplete. And there needs to be a much more comprehensive dialogue around sex and what it means for Black men, but just in general for youth.
Yeah. I would also say, for me, it was a combination of things. I had some healthy lessons, and I had some very unhealthy lessons. Of course, the healthy lessons that I've learned was a lot more indirect, was a lot more quieter. Didn't really hear about it. But the unhealthy lessons was in your face. You know, like kind of like Aubrey was saying, through the music, through our peers. Through just media. That's where I picked up a lot of the things that I've learned about sex growing up, where I had to kind of re-educate myself as I got older. But it definitely did a number on me through my younger years, which caused me to do a number on others. So if we can get into just what we actually learned personally through our teens and even through our 20s. I think we're all more mature guys now, but what are some of the specific lessons you learned about sex in your teens and your 20s?
Well, you know, we kind of grew up, you was with me through all those years, right? So we grew up in the same neighborhood. So a lot of your influences was probably my influences. You know, not to say that I didn't have a father, I didn't have uncles, didn't have people who had healthy, you know, sexual relationships. But I guess what I learned early in my teen years, I learned early that there is an attachment, right? We like to pretend as men, sexually, there's no attachment. But what I learned is for females, sometimes there is an attachment, right? And I learned that through just observing relationships in high school, right? I seen one of my teammates have a relationship with somebody, but it wasn't an authentic relationship. And when he cheated on her, I really seen how it affected this young lady mentally. Like her high school years was crazy. And, you know, just the arguments and just everything I seen her go through because I watched this guy tell her he loved her when he didn't really love her, right? And so what I took from that was I'm never going to say those words unless I mean it. But at the same time, I processed that a little bit differently. So what I processed is if I'm honest with you and tell you that I don't want any attachment and tell you I don't want any relationship and I'm straight up with you, then it shouldn't be an issue if we have any sexual relationship, right? It shouldn't be, you know, me breaking your heart, me lying to you or anything. So what I kind of slightly took from that is to be honest. However, I was using that honesty in the wrong way just to remove myself from any, you know, emotional attachment or any damage I may have done. I could always say, I told you, right? I told you, you know, this is what we're doing. I told you that I'm not looking for this. I told you that I'm not looking for that. So even though that wasn't the best lesson, even though I didn't process that lesson correctly, that's honestly one of the things I learned in my teens in terms of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, for me, I had to come when, like, I think it's a very different question about what I learned as a teenager and sort of what I learned in my 20s. And I would say later in life, what I learned really quickly is that sex doesn't equal fulfillment. Because in my teenage years, there was this idea that like, oh no, you have to be sexually active or you're not manly enough or you don't, all those things that we associate with coolness or popularity or societal standards sort of came through this unhealthy lens of conquest of women. And what I learned as I got older was like, no, there were a lot of brothers who were having sex and feeling confident because of that in raising their esteem based on sort of this unhealthy treatment and engagement with women. But then when you hit your 20s and nobody cares anymore, right? Like when you become older and they're like, you that's fine, but what are you doing in life? That fulfillment goes away. So you saw people sort of going back to this space of like, how do I become emotionally healthy when I thought this was something that defined me and it was something that sort of proved that I was good enough. So it took me a while, certainly as I got into my 20s, to say like, no, that's not how I want to define my life, and that's not how I want to define success for me. And it definitely can't be on the backs of women, in particular Black women who are mistreated enough. That I can't build myself up by tearing them down. That became really important for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that you guys said. Like, we definitely learned that sex validated our manhood. We definitely looked for acceptance, and that made us cool, that made us popular or a part of the group, or even envy. Like you said, Aubrey, we grew up in the same neighborhood. And Jamil, I mean, I'm sure your neighborhood was not much different than ours. And but during our 20s, the motto even took it one step further. It ain't no fun if my homie can't get none. So the level of disrespect even took it further. It's not that I'm only using a girl as a sexual object for myself. Now I have to even spread her around. Like I had sex with it. Now I'm gonna see my friend have sex with it too. So those were the type of lessons we was learning growing up. Like, it's not enough that, we use sex as selfishly for our own sexual gratification. Now we have to use it as something we share among others. And as I speak about that, I want to ask those unhealthy habits that you either experience or saw, the way we acted, the way we behaved when it comes to sex. What type of damage do you think it did to the women that we were involved in, or the women that you've seen going through this cycle of unhealthy sexual behaviors from men?
Yeah, and look, transparency, like I wasn't that guy growing up. Like I didn't have sort of this long list of, when they say bodies going through. But even like I was sort of the guy in high school, like the chronic monogamous dude. But even with those women that I was with, I didn't have the skill set to help guide them along emotionally or talk about the impact that was there, right? So sort of a kid leading a kid, trying to sort of engage in these things that we were too young to be able to process at that point in time. So, I wish I had the skill set to talk about like, hey, here's how this relationship is going to be able to this relationship is going to affect you long term. Here's how our negative behaviors are going to show up in the relationships that you have beyond this one. Like, even though we're 17 right now, and there's not malice in the way we treat one another, we just bring trauma to any engagement that you have with someone, and that trauma is only magnified when you have hurt people trying to buckle down together for it. So I wish I could have been able to healthfully deal with women in that way as a teenager, honestly, even to my early 20s, because I could talk to them and part ways in sort of a much more, in a much better fashion, that sort of, even if we don't work out, there's no damage done by this relationship, right? Like that. And that is something I learned later in life, that no matter who I'm with, even if you don't become my wife one day, you should leave this relationship with no damage or better off than you were before that. But I just didn't have that skill set even for myself, much less to help any young women I was dealing with at the time.
Yeah. Now, Aubrey, before you answer, Aubrey, remember I was there through your teens and your 20s. I don't want to call you out when I got
I'm speaking facts, like, what I'm saying? Exactly. You was there with me. So, I'm like, no, what I'm saying? But I think I definitely, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. And the reason why I want to backtrack a little bit is because of a lot of the things, speaking for me, was self-esteem building, right? So, I was skinny, big teeth, you know what I'm saying? I wasn't the flyest dude out there. So through these encounters and through these relationships, you know what I mean? I was trying to build myself up, right? Trying to build up my self-esteem and my self-worth. So the more women I could get, the more girls I could get, the more confident I felt about myself. But after a while, that cycle gets so toxic that that's all you do. That's your whole existence is trying to impress, trying to catch, spent years doing that, years. So, what are some of the effects that I may have had on others? I definitely know I probably did some emotional damage. Definitely probably did some emotional damage. Definitely hurt some feelings. Might have opened up the floodgates to somebody who wasn't planning on being promiscuous to be promiscuous, and then possibly even having people do things that they never would have done, probably regretted doing, just because, I got them to do it. You know what I'm saying? And I know they would have never did it. This wasn't how they was raised. This ain't how they was act. But I almost kind of poisoned them and had them doing something that they wouldn't normally do. And now that's with them, right? So they got to live with that. I'm hoping and praying they moved on with that. But those are definitely some of the things I probably did in those reckless times and those times where, I was just all about me, all about my flesh and all about, my pleasure. And again, feeding that ego of feeling like I'm in control. And that's what it really all boils down to. It's a control thing, right? I'm in control. I can get you to do this. I can get you to do that. Or I can get her, or I can have her. Is really a control thing. And it's toxic. That behavior is toxic.
Yeah. I think, Aubrey, I probably told you this story once before. A few years ago, I ran into a young lady that I used to deal with, like in my 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, or something like that. And it was years before until I seen her, just probably like another 10 years later. So, I'm coming up to her like, hey, how you doing? What you been up to? How's life going? And she started to kind of like just reveal some stuff to me. And she told me how she was in therapy and all that stuff. So I'm didn't want to get too deep into it. So I just like, I hope things are okay. And then she started to tell me that she was in therapy because of the relationships and, the cycle that she's been in. And then she looked at me and was like, and said, hey, and you were one of the reasons I'm in therapy, like speaking about me. And like, that hit me like a ton of bricks when she said that to me, because in my 20s, I was just having fun. I was just, just doing my thing, running around, probably had a collection, but not understanding or realizing the impact that I was having on somebody else. Like something that I took so lightly and so casually. This lady, I don't know if she was in love, but she was invested emotionally and psychologically. And when I just was able to walk away and just break it off because I got tired of doing it, like I left her damaged. And that's really why I want to have this conversation. I want to talk to generations that's coming up behind us, other young Black men, sons that we have, nephews that we have, and want to be able to have them to look back at this video and learn from our lessons. So if you guys can give the younger generation some advice on how to respectfully and properly use their sexuality or control their sexual desires, what would you tell them?
Yeah, for me, I think like Aubrey mentioned this idea around esteem, right? And esteem, you're not going to find that elsewhere, right? You're not going to find it through another individual. You're definitely not going to find it through chasing sex or any of the other things that society props up as like the attainment that you have to get. So my biggest prayer for younger generation, especially young Black men and women, is this idea of like seeking emotional well-being and seeking emotional health first before you try to deal in any dynamics of like deep romantic relationships with people, right? Like how do we, Adam, I know we've spoken a lot about therapy and all those other things, especially if you're coming from some sort of troubled childhood. this idea of, I didn't learn about therapy until I was in sort of my mid to late 20s, much less if I was like a 17, 18-year-old. Like you wouldn't even got me to cross my mind. So how do we create that as like the way that we get our self-esteem and we get our value and we learn who we are, of this learning about ourselves, not trying to find it through other people or conquest of women, or trying to obtain money or societal standard or social media clout or likes, follows, all those other things. Like that's the biggest thing, to be focused on being emotionally healthy, dealing with your trauma, and learning how to healthily engage with other people before you try to find those other things.
It's tough. It's tough. And I've taught the kids, you know, as you said, like I've been, you know, I've taught elementary, I've taught middle school, now I teach high school. But I definitely, when I do talk to younger people, I try to talk to them, especially the young ladies, from telling them the truth in terms of things I used to do and things I used to say and things they should look out for and things they should be wary of. And also the biggest thing is to love yourself, right? You build yourself up. And I tell that to my son and I tell that to my nephew, build yourself up, right? Have friends right now. You know what I mean? Just have healthy relationships right now. And then I also tell them to, you know, don't be in a rush, right? And that's the big, we was in a rush. You know what I'm saying? Like, and my prayer is always for kids is to keep it age appropriate, if that has any meaning anymore. But there's no such thing as age appropriate anymore. And that's what I try to tell them, be age appropriate. All that stuff will come. You know what I'm saying? Right now, just have healthy relationships. It's okay to like people. It's okay to be attracted to people. That's fine. But you don't got to rush into nothing. Because even you think about it, like probably in high school, we had that one that you might have thought, you know, you're in love and, you know, this is going to be forever. And then, you know, you get that first heartbreak and it's like, oh, what do we do now? Right. So, you know, I just try to tell them, be honest with themselves, take their time, be age appropriate. And then for the ones that, you know, maybe a little bit, you know, more mature in that space of where they're doing things, just be mindful, right? Protect yourself. Be careful and having these conversations about the effect that relationship could have later on down the line on you or that other person.
No, that's good stuff, man. And I agree with what both of you guys said. You know, as far as like finding your value and your worth in things other than sex, or you know, how many women you can get, how many partners you can have. Like we really have to, as young men, as Black men, we have to find our value in things that really matter, things that really count, things that, you know, make us the person that we really are. And with the friendship part, like I can speak about that from personal experience. I used to have a very hard time just developing friendships with women. Like if I was not talking to a girl because I wanted something sexual with her, you probably wouldn't see me talking to her. Like I didn't have the skill, I didn't have the desire or the ability just to have a platonic friendship with a woman. And I think if I just add to what you guys said, like I would tell my son, I have a son, he's about to be 13. I have nephews. I would tell them you have to look at women as people. Like women are people. Women are not sexual objects. Women are not something where you can just get yourself gratified from. They're people. They have emotions. They have their own thoughts. They have their own feelings. Like they're just not something that you can use and throw away. And I think that was one of my most I guess toxic way of thinking growing up. I didn't see them as full people. I just saw them as something that can fill my sexual satisfaction. I had a real selfish way of thinking.
Yeah, and I would say even beyond that, Adam, too, right? Like we got to protect Black women, right? That spirit has been lost somewhere around the way. Like it's our duty, one of our duties as Black men, to advocate for women. And we talk about, like, they talk about male privilege and all those things. They're things that we just don't worry about as men, right? Like the idea of being promiscuous and having sex and with a bunch of people, like it just doesn't carry the same societal pressure or weight on us as men in ways that it's viewed as positively for us as men versus how it's viewed as women. So beyond just like that's baseline of like, let me treat you as an individual, but we need to almost go beyond that to like actively take a role in protecting women, and particularly as Black men protecting Black women.
Yeah, that's good, man. I totally agree. So before I wrap it up, I just have one more question for you guys. Now, like I said, I came face to face with someone that I hurt in the past. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. If you guys had 60 seconds to speak to a young lady that you might have damaged from your actions, or if you know a young lady that was damaged by a friend of yours or a family member, just due to our unhealthy sexual habits, what would you say to them?
I would probably say, I pray that you forgive me, right? Also, I would hope that that person or those people knows or knew that I'm in a totally different place and space. And, throughout that course of time, teens, 20s, I was a different person. My focus was different. I'm a different person. Like I'm not the same person. My ideals was twisted. I was selfish. I was conniving, scheming. I was a heathen. Like I was a heathen. But I would hope that time has healed wounds. I would hope that there's forgiveness, and hope that they have been able to move on, settle down, and be emotionally good in their current relationship.
Yeah, man, I got this question from you, and I thought about it for a while, and I don't think I have a good answer now, or I think it would depend on the individual and what they're seeking to get. For apologies are always necessary. I think things that we've done intentionally to harm people, we need to apologize, and also for things that we might have done unintentionally to harm people, we need to apologize. So I would 100% sort of offer that. And also offer sort of my path to healing too, right? Like here to talk about here are the things that I did that helped me become a better individual. And I pray that you are also seeking out those things, whether it's what Aubrey said around being in a healthy relationship now, or that's through finding therapy or sort of getting a better sense of self. So I would offer that path as well. And then listen, right? Like sometimes people need closure. So I think it would be important for me if I was in that situation to listen, to figure out why this young woman was talking to me, what type of closure she needed. And then how can I offer that closure for her so that she can close this chapter in her life, or that chapter in her life, so that she can move forward, because that's all I want, right? I want anyone that I ever deal with, certainly anyone I ever dealt with romantically, to be happy, healthy, and have a great life beyond me.
Amen. I just echo what both you guys say. Like the first thing I would definitely say is I'm sorry. And hopefully assure her that, my behaviors, or I would hope that my behaviors was not a reflection of who she was as a person, that it did not affect her self-esteem or her worth or her value. It was a stage of life that I was in at the time. And, I do definitely have to thank God for growth and maturity, and that I know I'm no longer that way. And I would hope that she has also grown from that experience, or took that pain and turned it into some type of purpose, where it's still not haunting her right now. This was What Was He Thinking? The Sexual Education of Black Men in America. And we've been your personal tour guide through a man's heart and a man's mind and his emotions on this topic. I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you learned from the show, and I hope that you be blessed.